My work originally began with what we call magic squares. All my work is based on puzzles. So if I said to you, here's 9 playing cards, can you juggle them around in such a way so that suddenly everything adds up to the same number? So that number was 15. Now they all are feng shui. I've just been to an international feng shui conference in America, and somehow I'm considered now as like a world authority on magic squares because I've spent my life turning those numbers into art. So by joining a line from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, you make these elegant patterns, but these beautiful patterns on another level are actually the back door into nuclear geometry. So what I do is I create books for children where they think that they have this activity book where you just join 1 to 2 to 3 of the magic square, they create a pattern, but they're actually creating highly intelligent and sophisticated nuclear atomic art patterns. So suddenly math, actually I'm saying math because I've been in America, they call it math, whereas mathematics is art, mathematics is history, mathematics is science. So what I'm demonstrating to teachers is that mathematics is a universal language and that it crosses what we call the KLAs, the key learning areas. So I'm here to just let teachers know that children are shutting down because they're not really getting it, and we're giving them lots of drugs like Ritalin, which compounds the situation. And a lot of these dyslexic children, they're already gifted. They shut down because their brain starts mirror imaging and reversing and doing complex things for neural entertainment. But we call them dumb and, clumsy, but they're not. So we've got to really understand what children want and how to satisfy their needs. So here we have a magic square. Like I said, the ancients had puzzles. This was an ancient puzzle. How do we arrange 16 numbers so that all the columns, rows and diagonals add up to the same? When we turn the numbers into a picture, we've gone from the left brain, the logical left brain, to the right brain. So we've accessed higher dimensional knowledge by turning the numbers into a picture. So this was an ancient puzzle, and we'll talk half an hour on that. This backdrop that you see here is actually the magic square pattern derived from those numbers. So even though they look like different things, they're really saying the same thing but in a different language. That's numerical and that's geometrical. But they're both the vibration of 4, magic square of 4 and a visual magic square of 4. Before we get right into the magic squares, I'd like to transition with a subject called the Vedic square, which kind of belongs in the world of Vedic maths, which we've just done, and also in a way it's a kind of a magic square. But this Vedic square is actually based on the multiplication table. Because I was just showing you now the finger computations, how to do multiplication table, have you ever wondered about the depth of what knowledge is inside your multiplication table? So I'm just going to show you a few more transparencies to show you that there's a galactic knowledge, a world, an infinite world of knowledge and wisdom hidden within this everyday table of multiplication that we use. Before I show you the multiplication table, I just want to show you how this higher sense of intuitional mathematics was used by not just the yogis of India, but from my culture in Lebanon. 2,000 years ago, the Arabs, the Sufis and the masters of the temple building were able to adorn their temples with advanced mathematics. So what I'm showing you here, if you look at these diagrams here, is that if we start off with graph paper, with a series of grids and circles, which anyone can do, we're going to isolate this star and these hexagons just from this basic graph paper work. And from this design, we're going to subdivide it a little bit more just with graph paper and ruler, and we get this design, then this design, and then that design. And the final product was a very intricate circular design, and you're actually looking at the atomic structure of a crystal called beryl. So the question that arises is, how did these Arabic masters 2,000 years ago, without computers and microscopes, how did they know that the atomic structure of a crystal called beryl? And these are found in the temples that are honoured to Allah and Muhammad. Now we have to realise that ancient Mosaic law 2,000 years ago was such that they believed that the human body was in a divine proportion. It kind of like the body is divine, that God was in all living things. So there was an ancient law from Moses where you were not allowed to represent the human body because it was divine. Like we were made in the image of the Lord, which is a typical Christian saying. We were made in the image of the Lord. So that they weren't allowed to use icons or human iconography. So the Arabs became masters of mathematics because they weren't allowed to draw humans or animals. So they hid all their creativity in the number world. So when you look at their mosques and domes, it was actually a secret advanced language of the language of God, because they couldn't draw the divine form, so they expressed it mathematically. So that's how the Arabs became the masters of magic squares, which is what we're leading on to now. And perhaps this memory of magic squares is in my DNA. It's kind of a lineage from my forefathers. So we're just the result, this contemporary life we have is just the result of many, many, many strings of incarnations where we have access to this multi-dimensional knowledge. Okay, so I want to lead on to the Vedic square. That's just an introduction. We have here now the multiplication table. The reason why I'm showing you this is that we can all identify with the multiplication table. In fact, it's kind of the emblem of Western mathematics when you think about it. Since the age of 5, 6, 7, we've all been learning how to multiply, how to do rote learning. So what I'm going to do now is it's like I'm going to tear it apart and open a window and go inside the dogma, inside the logical array of numbers, and it's like I'm going to put X-ray goggles on and I'm going to penetrate through all that data. And the secret of this higher dimensional language is by pictures. So the only way that we can really map consciousness is through the symbolic language of art. So what we're entering now is a visual journey through something that you identify with. So the multiplication table here was adored even by Leonardo da Vinci. And you can see here in his memoirs and his notebooks that he was obsessed about this arrangement of multiplication. Whatever it means to you, like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, it could represent symbolically growth, how crystals and viruses grow. It's just the representation of growth. And what we're going to look at is we're going to look at all the numbers that represent 1. We're going to get a visual representation of oneness or two-ness or three-ness. We're going to start seeing pictures, numbers, as actual pictures, which is what we're not familiar with. So I just wanted to show you that Leonardo examined the multiplication table. And here's something from the Vedas now. This is Vedic knowledge now. They looked at all the numbers here in the multiplication table and they said, where's all the numbers with zeros, like 10, 60, 50? You can see that all the 10 times table, this is the 10 times table, 10 by 10. You can see all the 10 times table, they have zeros in them. So that's what all these lines represent here. So every dot you see represents the center of each little cell. So you can see from this cross in here that there's also a 10 there, which must be this number 25 times 4 is 20. So we just mark it. So you get the child. This is like a worksheet for a child. And we say, where's all the numbers with a 0 in it? So here's this cross and this L shape. And you get the child to join all the dots. And look what we get. We end up with an octahedral shape. So then I get a child to build that three-dimensional shape without them knowing what this is. I get them with these magnetic toys. You get them to literally sort of create it three-dimensionally. So two-dimensional, it's like a diamond. So then you ask them, what's the three-dimensional version of a diamond? And we see that it's an octahedral crystal. So this is where the shapes become the higher dimensional language, because shapes store memory. Everything that we're just looking at now on the screen is actually stored vibrationally in this shape. I believe that in the future, shape will be the future technology, to the point where by even operating a keyboard, just by visualizing the shape of what we're wanting to accomplish, it will be done because of the power of intent. The key to visualizing and holding the forms of shape. So that's what my journey is about, is to teach children to see mathematics as shapes. Okay. So here's the Vedic square. Remember I said that when I was talking before about dyslexic children, I was actually one of those type of children. So as a teenager at school, I was so bored at school with mathematics that I just switched off, and so in my notebooks I was doodling and sketching all these kind of diagrams, and this is something that I worked out 25 years ago. So I called it the visual multiplication table and its reduction grid. So I took the multiplication table like this that we all know, like 2 times 6 is 12. So we know that there's going to be double digits and single digits in this multiplication table. So what I'm going to do now is, remember in the Vedic mathematics I was saying there's 16 sutras, and one of them was called digital compression or digital sums. So what we're going to do here now is we're going to add all the digits. So wherever you see a double digit, like let's say 6 times 6 is 36, but 36 is 3 plus 6, which is 9, so I'm going to place a 9. So this table here is called the Vedic square because it's all compressed to single digits. So it's quite an easy thing. So this is a worksheet for children. You tell the children, reduce digitally all the double digits in the multiplication table. Then you give them a colour pencil and you say, on this blank square of 81 cells, I want you to plot all the ones. Here's a 1, there's a 1, and they get to colour those numbers in over here. They find, oh, there's a 1 down here, so I'm going to colour it in, and there it is there. So they discover, oh, there's 6 cells that have the vibration or the memory of oneness, 1. So we've isolated all the ones, but it still doesn't show us any meaning. It still looks random, and we're on a journey of discovering mathematics, experimental mathematics. How can we exude some meaning from those 6 digits? There must be some relationship between each one of those cells. Einstein would say, in a sense, that there's a unified field, that this point is connected to every other point. So then you instruct the child to connect this dot to every other dot that represents the 1. And lo and behold, voila, we have the same expression of those 6 ones as a visual image is this diagram here. So this point here, which is there, is connected to every other point in space. So I join a line from that 1 to every other one, and then from this point here I have to connect every other point as well. So this is the natural answer. This answer is a solution on not just this planet but any other planet. This is ancient knowledge, fixed design, eternal mathematics, because it will always exist. And then we can say, well, where's all the points of 8s? Let's go back to the Vedic square. Where's all the points of 8? And then you can say, oh, there's an 8 and there's an 8. So we plot all the 8s, and the child realises, oh, this all the points of 8 are at a 90-degree rotation to the original ones. So they start working out that 1 and 8 is 9. I wonder what all the other numbers are doing. So what the child has actually constructed in black and white is the shadow of a 3-dimensional crystal called rutile. So this is the atomic structure, this is the octahedral atomic structure of rutile crystal. For those of you who don't know what rutile is, if you've been on a beautiful white beach sand, a beautiful white beach, the sand that you see often has little black streaks running through it. That's the mineral that they've been mining for in North New South Wales, in Scott's Head. It's that rutile crystal which they need in their technology. So, and it's also the shape of many other minerals as well, not just rutile. Then you get the child to explore all the other numbers in the Vedic square, and you say, okay, we realise that the 1 and the 8 are complementary. And then when they plot all the 2s and all the 7s, they go, oh, that's interesting, they're also at a 90-degree relationship to each other. And then they plot all the 3s and the 6s, and that also adds up to 9. And obviously you can therefore predict, because you've learnt the language of shape, you could predict that, of course, the 4s and the 5s are at a 90-degree relationship to each other. When you read all this mystical literature, like the elders race from another dimension, came into our dimension at a 90-degree phase shift of consciousness, and also could enter this dimension by a 90-degree angle. There's a lot of references in ancient books talking about this cryptic 90-degree angle of phase shift consciousness. So because there's complementary pairs hidden in the Vedic square, I would therefore be tempted to superimpose the 1 and the 8s, the 2s and the 7s. So, like I said, this is experimental. We're searching, we're questing. So what would happen if I superimpose the 1, the octahedral crystal of 1, with the 8? They're the same self-similar shape at a different angle. We're exploring the relationship of different axes of tilt of the same diagram. So when I put the 1s on top of the 8s, I end up with another interesting shape. And it turns out that this shape here is the atomic nuclear geometry of another crystal called platinum crystal. So if you could visualize this as a shard of platinum, this little lighter here, they have a little dome on top of this crystal, and they magnify the top of the dome crystal 750,000 times. And when we magnify platinum dome hemisphere 750,000 times, we end up with a very exotic image. What we're looking at now is a very important diagram. It was given to us by the late Professor E.H. Muller. But what you're looking at is the identical structure of the 1s and the 8s. Now this is very important because now we've got scientists who are verifying that these numbers that we've arrived at from the visual landscape of Vedic squares is true. That the physics and the metaphysics are becoming one. That's what the theme is. That's what's really important, that we want to bring the world of physics with the world of metaphysics together, that there is no separation. The role of the scientist who scrutinises things is as valid as the eye of the mystic who sees things all-knowingly. They're coming together. East and West are coming together. I might put this other diagram back up just to show you. If you could look at this diagram, every single line that you see in this Vedic square can be seen resolved right down to the very atom. So you need to look at that three-dimensionally, which is the octahedral crystal again. You're looking at some kind of octahedral expression of light. We suspect that light expresses itself in pyramid-type shapes. These are very critical angles. And by understanding how to go from the 2D to the 3D, it creates a pathway to go multidimensional. This is very powerful to go in the next dimension, to travel from shadowland to 3 dimension, to 4th dimension, to 5th dimension. And we're using art as our tool to x-ray and penetrate the mysteries. That's one reason why we're calling this segment Atomic Art of Magic Squares. This banner here is the only banner that's not a magic square, and it's actually the atomic structure of platinum crystal. So this shows my early fascination 20 years ago when I painted these, that it's been a fascination to capture atomic art. So this diagram there and that diagram there are identical. The atomic structure of platinum crystal. So this banner here is based on the digital compression or the reduced digits of the multiplication table. Up here we have all the 9s. There's this row of 9s here, like this L shape, and then there's 4 9s, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's the 4 9s. So what happens if you join those 4 dots to every other dot here, and this dot to every other dot? You end up with this shape here. There's that with the 4 9s. So that's the expression of all the 9s. And in sacred geometry, you're permitted to have a creative license, so you can take this shape and tile it over here, and over there, and you end up with beautiful geometrical patterns which are blessed here by 4 angels of the 4 corners. So you can see why a lot of my books that I've been writing, they're all activity books and colouring in books. They're just purely to inspire children to remember, because all the knowledge is already there. It's just about activating children's consciousness with what we call psychoactive diagrams, because it's already in their universal memory bank. I'd like to conclude this section on the Vedic square with a quote from Sven Carlson from Science News, and he said, "Art and science will eventually be seen to be as closely connected as arms to the body. Both are vital elements of order and its discovery. The word art derives from the Indo-European base ar, meaning to join or fit together. In this sense, science, in the attempt to learn how and why things fit, becomes art. And when art is seen as the ability to do, make, apply or portray in a way that withstands the test of time, its connection with science becomes more clear." And that's what I call fixed design, eternal design. Mathematics, again I repeat, is a star language, universal, it's a forever language. When you think of, say you're learning a language like French or German, we know that in 500 years or 1,000 years it evolves and changes. It's not eternal, it's always constantly evolving. But we know that this concept of 1 and 2 and 3, no matter which planet you're on, it'll always exist for the next 10,000 years, the next 10 million years. So this is what I mean by fixed design. A lot of people have asked me how they can teach their children to draw and construct these magic square patterns. So over the last 25 years I've actually created a whole series of books on magic squares. This was my first book on magic squares. So it's a colouring in activity book for children and adults of all ages, and it goes from magic squares of 3 by 3 to the 4, 5, 6 and 7. Okay. And a lot of these books, they also have solutions. They show you the patterns that you're actually going to draw. And then as I started working more and more in schools, I ended up creating a book on a computer known as Join the Dots. Small, easy to read, no pictures from India, just basically here's the numbers, here's the dots, draw it, and solutions. So these are the same magic squares of 3, 4, 5 and 6. This book here is the second of the 3 series. This is the Book of Magic Squares Volume 2, and it deals with magic squares of 8, 9 and 10. And just to show you some of the pages, the style of the book is pretty much like all handwritten. Wherever you see numbers and dots, that's where the activity happens. Here's another example. This is the style. The reason why these books are spiral bound is so that they can open up flat, so the student can work with a book open flat. This is the third book. This violet coloured book is the Book of Magic Squares Volume 3, and it deals with the larger squares like 11, 12 and 16. It's also got an unusual and large chapter on the Vedic square, the multiplication table that's been compressed. It's also got an excellent glossary. Here's an example of the glossary that's all done in calligraphy. So this has taken over like 15 years of handwriting these manuscripts. So soon these books will be out of print because they're going to be redrawn on computer.